Next guest is Sarah Wysocki. She is a longtime educator, child advocate, author, and mom living in Annandale, Virginia. She is a lifelong learner who has a Bachelor of Science in Health Psychology, a Master's in Teaching, and a postgraduate certificate in TESOL. Sarah is driven to support the growth and development of the whole child with a special interest in social and emotional well being. When she's not busy sparking the love of learning in her students, she can be found volunteering in her neighborhood or on the pickleball courts, building friendship and community. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So I connected with you because I went to a session that you were recently at the ACTFL conference, and we'll talk a little bit about some of your work around ChatGPT with multilingual learners that you presented on. But we'll start off with the question I ask everybody at the beginning. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Well, when I think about really being in the trenches was when I first started teaching. I remember the first day I was left alone. I had this fantastic co-teacher who made everything look so easy, and I thought that I was a good teacher, but really I wasn't. She was good in holding everything together. So I remember when she told me she was going to be out for the day and I was going to be in charge, I was not worried in the least. But then when the day came, those kids ate me alive. And I just learned so quickly how I didn't, there was all these nuances of teaching that I did not understand. And throughout many years, I have learned a lot of things. And I think that now I am in a place where I can help other people get out of the trenches and, yeah, make sure that kids aren't like throwing computer monitors and going crazy like I had my first day on my own. So that kind of takes me just to an image of me literally being in a trench and being afraid that I was not going to make it out alive, and to where I am today, which is still in the trenches, but not as much, and more in a joyful place.
Yeah, I can understand having worked as a ELD co-teacher as well. And, you know, uh, when students are used to two adults in the classroom and there's only one, right, the behaviors can be different when they know that the other teacher they're expecting to see isn't there. But yeah, I think that's very um, reminiscent of people's first year or just a time where, they were encountered with a situation that was new to their students. So you write for Edutopia a lot, and I'll be linking your profile page for Edutopia in the show notes, but I wanted to highlight a little bit about what you've written recently. But first of all, tell me how you got started writing with Edutopia.
Every year I set goals for myself, both professionally and personally. So a few years ago, I really wanted to be published in education, just as a way to contribute to part of the bigger conversation of what is happening in the field of education. So my first article was about pickleball because I love pickleball and I thought that that might be something of interest. And then from there, I just realized that I actually did have things more substantial to write about. And I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to highlight things that work in education, which is what Edutopia is all about. Because every day there's amazing things happening in schools across the country. And so once I started writing for them, I kind of looked for these ideas and these things that I think would be useful to a broader audience of what's working and how they could apply it in their own classrooms.
And is what you write on, is that something you often choose, or do they give you a list?
I usually choose. Sometimes they'll solicit pitches and they'll be asking for something specific. And if it's something I can write to, then I go for it. But often it's a noticing I have, and very often it's something I see a colleague or an administrator or someone else that I see they're doing something great, and then I write about that. Or it could be just as I evolve in the classroom, things that have worked for me and just the insights I have, especially in my position now where I'm doing lot more support versus being the one that's like running the complete show all the time. So it's really just paying attention to what is working and, where are these little diamonds in everyday life in a school.
Oh, I wanted to talk a little bit about a recent article about helping encouraging the love of reading in English language learners. And I think a lot of people who have taught um, multilingual learners, ELD students, they know that when it comes time for the access test, reading is often a one of the scores that remains stagnant over several years, and also with other benchmarks that students take. So what are some of your tips in encouraging the love of reading? And this can also apply to students who are not multilingual learners.
Yes, well, I think that with reading, when I spoke with my students about why they didn't like it, they all said it was boring and it felt very solitary and something that you just do by yourself. And so the article I really wrote about how to make it a more a communal event and how kids can tie their own stories into reading. But I think by like we even in middle school we make a circle and we all and I will read stories and sometimes they're pretty silly stories and the kids laugh, but it's like a very happy and joyous time. And it's a time where we're all like in close proximity and um, so I think that taking that from sitting at your desk to this is something we do together. This is a reading is a way to laugh together. It's a way to share our stories not just in text, but in our life too. And I think that that really is powerful, especially in these, in a lot of communities where, it's not an individualistic community. It is more of a communal activity. So the ways you could weave in kids so they feel connected and it's not something that is something that other people do, but it's something that's relevant to them. And that also ties into the stories that we're reading and the way they can interact with material and act out things. So I think all of that kind of ties in together just to meet your students where they are. But I think harnessing like reading as something that is it could be a group activity. It can really bring cultures together and expand your world. The other thing that I didn't really write about in the article, but is clear in the day to day practice, is teaching reading strategies and phonics. So if a child is struggling with reading and you hand them a book with no support, that is not an enjoyable activity. So in that time, you have to find a way to bridge it. You have to find books that they could read. You have to develop the vocabulary and really fill in those gaps where reading isn't so arduous, but it's something that is useful and enjoyable and something that they can do. Because I feel like a lot of my students just they get a book and it just seems so impossible. There's so many words and it's such a chore. So breaking it down where it's not a chore and giving them the skills to be able to read, even if they're older.
Think a lot of secondary teachers expect, like a seventh grader is going to be, I would say, at least at a fourth grade level, right? But we're seeing a lot of students, whether they're transient students that speak English at home or students coming from other countries that really have gaps in learning and, may need the basic phonic instruction. And how do you coach some of your colleagues that have a lot of rather newcomers or students with gaps in education?
Well, one of the things that this year that I've really kind of have honed in on is using the data that we collect on students, because so often you can clearly see where the gaps are. If you look at all this, and we have a wealth of information, not on all our students, but on many of them. And then find where is that gap, and then let's go there. Is it in comprehension, in fluency, in phonics? Our district, we're really lucky that we have a ton of resources and all the EL 1 through 4, they get explicit multisyllabic routine instruction, which makes, again, it makes reading more accessible. It fills in those gaps. Um, and it's a challenge with like a geography teacher, for instance, because they don't have that same background. That's where I think really working with the EL teachers to fill in those gaps and not hand a eighth grader who's reading on a first grade level a very dense text and then get mad at them for goofing around. Because that's what the EL teacher is there for, to scaffold that assignment so it's accessible and they can contribute. But it's not easy. Like this year, I have three students who they're 13 and they've never been to school before. So every day I'm running my classroom a lot like an elementary school classroom where I'm doing work with those three, and then I have other kids working on other things. But it's not easy. It's a heavy lift.
So you talked a little bit about the multisyllabic reading instruction. Is that built into the ELD curriculum in your district?
It is. So it's we have 15 minutes that are designated every day of multisyllabic routines for our ELD students.
That's great because that helps them learn a lot about just the pronunciation of words, and it can tie over to their home language as well. I think the mistake a lot of teachers, especially like the core teachers, that make is that they expect the students are going to know how to read in their home language. And what I've seen in the past, or there are a lot of translations being made via Google Translate. However, the student might not have a very high reading level in their home language either. So, how really how does this kind of tie into the support? Because like we're seeing frustrations around a lot of just meeting the kids' needs, right? And finding out who our EL students really are, and who the program is intended for. So, what are some thoughts that you have around just more intentional, I would say, placement, et cetera?
Um, I think when it comes to placement, one thing that is very difficult is that our students are beholden to the WIDA test, which is, they take it and they take the test very early in the year. It's in February they take that, and if they don't get a 4.4 on this test, then they are considered EL. Um, and I think that when we have like long-term L students, it's really important to look and see like on the WIDA where is their score low. So instead of just taking an aggregated number, oh, they're a 3, like really looking at where the deficits are, where are the strengths, and then providing support that way. Um, and I think the conversation about who our EL students are, it's an interesting one, and it's something I think a lot of people would be shocked. And I was surprised when I first started off in EL. I thought it was going to be kids that were new to the country or kids that didn't speak any English. And then when I became an EL teacher, I learned very quickly that's not the case. Often these are kids that are born here, and sometimes like English is their primary language. Um, so I when yeah, so I think that there's a lot of questions to be asked about who our EL students are, and are we serving them the way the program nationally and locally, is it really serving their needs?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it boils down to staffing. For example, in terms of having enough ELD teachers that can, um, you know, do the different levels, right? Do a beginner class or a high beginner class, an intermediate and an advanced class, rather than placing everybody who's identified into the same class, right? Which does happen in some schools where there is only one ELD teacher. And I think, like you said, being able to exit the program, this is a standardized test, so there's going to be a lot of kids who score stagnant across many years, and I've seen in recent work is 5 years of the same, roughly 4.4 or 3.6, whatever it is, and then they're just placed year after year in ELD classes. I mean, is that really serving the kids? That's my question in terms of, being held to a test, a score on a standardized test.
Yes, and with that, and some of these students that are long-term Ls and they just can't get that 4.4, they only speak English. And then the pushback is, well, they don't have the academic English. And that's where I think we really need to look and see is this a fair test? Is it a fair way to set up our EL programs? Because if it's about academic English, then I feel like every student should take the WIDA, not just a student that is exposed or has a parent that speaks a different language, because it seems it unintentionally segregates kids. Where if you have a parent that speaks Spanish at home and you're a poor test taker, you may never get out of this ELD program, even though you only speak English. And we have my family. My husband is Peruvian. His first language is Spanish. He speaks English, but not very well. My kids, they speak perfect English, and they did very well on the WIDA in kindergarten, so they're not in the EL program. But I have a nephew who's not a great test taker, and he grew up with English, but his one of his parents speaks Spanish, and he's in seventh grade now. He's still in the ELD program. So I see it firsthand with my family where it's interesting. And then I have some nieces and nephews where people are afraid that they to mark that they speak Spanish on any form because they don't want them labeled as EL and to be put into the EL program when they feel like it's not going to serve them. Because as the kids get older, sometimes if they're in this EL program, like in high school, it takes away an elective, so they're stuck in this ELD program that may or may not be beneficial to them because of the WIDA score. And if it's a child that only speaks English, it seems like a huge disservice to them. If we're not going to hold everybody to that same standard, that everybody, regardless of whether you are exposed to a second language or not, if it's about academic language and not necessarily being bilingual, then why are we not screening everyone for that 4.4? Because it does seem like it's unfair. It's very and it a lot of Hispanic kids are in this program because of a parent speaking Spanish, and it does seem punitive when that's not the intention behind the WIDA score.
And I think like I know in recent years they're trying to use wording that makes it more of a focusing on their strengths rather than a deficit model, just in terms of supporting our students and coaching teachers who have these students in their classes. However, I think, like you're saying, when they're held to a score and they may or may not speak a second language, it is feeling like a deficit, right? And I think when it comes to academic language, like you said, if students score below a certain score on the state standardized English language arts test, maybe they should be put in, a reading intervention class. But we tend to hold that bar pretty low to put kids in a reading intervention class, right? As opposed to ELD. Like I think the bar is pretty high for them to be able to exit that. And like you said, a lot of students who have only spoken English their whole life are in this class because of a standardized score.
Yes, and it just seems like yeah, it almost seems like a new way of segregation. And I think sometimes these things start off as a good idea and well intentioned, but I think as society changes, as the demographics in our country change, it might also be wise to look at, should we be holding kids to this standard on one test? Like, should everything be writing on one test? Because I mean, I guess there are like important tests, like LSATs and ECTs and SATs and all that. Um, but even those, it's not, I don't know, it's a different, you could choose to take it, you could choose not to. With the WIDA, there's no choice, you have to take it. And yeah, so yeah, I think that there's a lot to kind of yeah, like ruminate on, and sort of think like, is this the best system? And if it's not, then what is a better way forward?
Yeah, I definitely think there's much that could be discussed at the federal level in terms of their programming, right? Because this is something the states have to then take. It's mandated down from the states to the school, and it's not something we could change at the school level. And I think the only way, if parents realize this program's not serving their student, it's the parents that have to then fill out the exit paperwork and go to the meetings. And there's a lot of red tape to get the
Yeah,
student exited from the program as
yes,
well.
yes. And and often if you're like, like my husband grew up in Peru, he's not familiar with the American school systems. I mean, I am, so I can navigate that for my kids. And actually, I was in a meeting today for my son, and education is one thing I'm pretty knowledgeable on. And even in that meeting, I had a lot of questions because there's just so, like, everything is so dense and there's so many layers to everything. And if that it so yeah, like having parents be the ones that always have to fight the fight is kind of yeah, it's it could be a challenge too. But I do think that is kind of like an awareness of, because we have parents that they didn't even realize their kid was in the ELD program. uh so yeah, I think that there's, yeah, like I said, there's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah, and like you said, it often is a parent who works in the school system, whether as a teacher or a classified staff member, that then takes the initiative to exit their child. But a lot of parents don't know enough about the system to start that process. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think this is something we could definitely discuss for a long time, but it is hopefully something that could be overhauled in upcoming years. So let's talk a little bit about your session that I saw at ACTFL. It's about Chat GPT with multilingual learners. And talk to me about how you've used Chat GPT in the classes. And I know a lot of teachers are afraid of having students overuse Chat GPT. So how do you really scaffold like the use of it or overuse?
For me, I really focus on how teachers can use ChatGPT to be more productive. So it's not really even having students use ChatGPT, although there are a lot of great applications for that too. But I think with ChatGPT, what I love about it is you can so easily and quickly create lessons that are designed for the children that are sitting in your class this year today. And even if you're using an old standby lesson, being able to throw your lesson into Chat GPT and um, give it some directions, like make this relevant for my students that came from Venezuela, and it'll just interject little things about Venezuela into the lesson, where the kids see themselves as not like an afterthought, but they're the ones that are driving the lesson. They're the ones that are driving the materials you're using in class. Uh, and going back to like fostering a love of reading for ELDs, one of my favorite things to do is to create scripts, readers theater scripts that are based on a specific student in the class. And it's fun when we have those, because when they first get the script, everyone's reading through it and trying to figure out, all right, who's the main, the celebrity this week. Um, and again, it's things that the kids can relate to and see themselves in. And I think the more that we can do that for our students, the more like education and learning, it becomes meaningful. Because I think anyone in education right now, um, we're fighting a lot of apathy with our students where it's like, what is, like what's the point of this and how is this relevant? But I think when we can make lessons that reflect our students, interests and who they are as people, that really helps makes things more meaningful and uh, yeah, just where, like I said, like the student is the forethought; they're not an afterthought in what you're doing. Um, and when, like, often when you think about a classroom, it's like the classroom hasn't changed that much, even though the world has changed so much. So I like, for me, it's like, how can we blend kind of like the foundational skills that they need to know with this, the tech world we're living in. And I mean, with AI, I'm very curious to see how everything unfolds and like what are our children's future, what is it going to look like, what skills are they going to need. So I think, like, yeah, uh, when kids are using Chat GPT, like being able to think critically and ask the right questions, those are really useful skills. And that's something that I see with a lot of my students, is like that ability to think, to generate original ideas is something they struggle with. And if you struggle with that, your prompts you're putting into Chat GPT are not going to be very good. And you will not be able to look at the information you're receiving and read it critically and tell if it's true and factual. So I think that, like, when kids are using it, also helping them think through like what you really want to know. How are you going to know that this is true? And helping to develop some of those critical thinking skills, which are essential when you're using AI. Because otherwise it could regurgitate any nonsense and you'll take it at face value. So I think that's like one of the scary sides of Chat GPT and AI, but it's also something that you can harness to help like elevate people's thinking.
Yeah, it made me think a little bit about a podcast episode I recorded probably in the summer of 2020, and it was around digital literacy. And I think that ties a lot into digital literacy, and it would be great if more schools, at least at the secondary level, I would think upper elementary, middle school kids had that as a elective or a one of those rotating electives they have for maybe a quarter, because really harnessing how to put in AI prompts or use just search engines properly, those things. I think often teachers think students already know how to do that, right? And you're still at the middle school level dealing with a lot of kids that when you assign them a project and you're having to repeat, copy and pasting is plagiarism, don't use Wikipedia, those types of
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
right?
And I think that's a really good point, that there is this assumption that because kids grow up with computers and iPads and phones, that they know how to utilize them or use them well. And that is just not the case. Even, I watch my kids at home, and playing a game on a computer is much different than doing research or putting together a project or a podcast or any of these like creative endeavors, which um, some kids may know, like may have an interest towards that and do that on their own, but a lot don't. And yeah, so how do you use these tools that are part of your everyday life in a way that is yeah, improving your life and improving your thoughts, and versus just wasting time.
Yeah, and I think that's a bigger conversation in education that really needs to happen as we use more ChatGPT and AI in our classes. And I think, in my experience so far, since the ChatGPT came out, I think it's more kids at the high school and post-secondary level who are using it. However, students have used AI in terms of search engines and Google Translate, and they are taking a lot of that face value, right? Search engine, what it comes up with, which may or may not be a good site, right? Or Google Translate, which still has a lot of flaws and often are kind of that it's a crutch for students, right? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that, yeah, I think with all these tools, there's a level of training because
yeah,
I taught fifth grade for many years, and when we did research projects, um, it was always very challenging for students to find relevant articles, relevant information, because it is a taught skill, and just putting something into Google is not always going to give you the results you want. And I think being able to tie that into yeah, like AI, and um, it's the same thing of like these are skills that need to be taught in order to utilize the technology that is there, versus here it is and good luck. Yeah, or just trying to say just don't use it, because if the fact of the matter is kids, they are going to use ChatGPT. They are already using AI. So there has to be, that's why, like, for me as a parent and an educator, I always try and stay like one step ahead of the kids.
yeah.
So we also have to educate ourselves on what, the downsides and how to use this and how to instruct our kids to be responsible, users of technology.
That's why I think sessions like yours on ChatGPT or AI related sessions at conferences are very important to have as we move forward, right? And I think any teachers, whether they're new or veteran, really need to learn more, like you said, to keep ahead of the game and to know like how this is being used, even if they are hesitant to use it in lesson planning. It's just knowing kind of what it looks like and examples of what can be made. Like you gave some examples in your session of some of the graphics, and there's still a lot of mistakes in a lot of those graphics depending on the different AI sites that you go to. But also there are some videos. I think you gave an example of a video that you can cater for a reading text down to. So and a lot of educators still don't know, right? That that's
Yes.
possible.
Yes, and I was having a conversation with someone who's not in education, but he was just saying, the future belongs to those that are going to embrace AI and learn to harness it, and those that are just like, um, eventually, like they're probably going to be replaced, or they're going to have trouble keeping up because not that AI is a cure all or the end all, but it does speed up certain things,
Yeah.
and it is a useful tool. To me, I like when I first used ChatGPT, I was pretty blown away by it, but then I was like, this isn't going away, and it also made me kind of wonder. Like when Google first came out, what did people think about that? Was it like, ooh, I don't, I don't know the answer to that, but it did make me kind of wonder, like, is when new technology comes out, is there always a portion of the population that's like, "Oy," and just doesn't embrace it? And to be fair, I think that being skeptical of AI is reasonable. Like there are reasons to ask questions and be critical of it, and its place and what it can do, and actually understanding what it could do, and the limitations.
Yeah. And even though there are limitations now, like you showed on those graphics, like they have some mistakes, those will be quickly right, taken care of. It's like bugs in a system, right? So in a
Yeah,
couple more years, the graphics might not look as fake either. But a lot of our
yeah.
students, right, they can't tell the difference between AI and a human made graphics.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the thing I like, and I think I said this during my presentation, when I put in my proposal to present at the conference, that in my head, that proposal was outdated, that I
Yeah.
put in, it was outdated by when November came along. And I presented at a conference in June in New Orleans, and and when I went through that, my old presentation, I was like, gosh, this I need to revamp this a lot just from so the how quickly it's evolving and changing. I mean, it's pretty cool, and it's also pretty alarming because that wasn't it wasn't. I'm not talking about years. You know, I'm not quite sure when I put in my proposals. You know, maybe 7 months ago, but June was, you know, like a shorter amount of time just from summer to fall, and
Yeah.
to have so much of my information be outdated in such a short period of time. Yeah, that was um, yeah, and in a way it was kind of exciting because it is getting better, and those kinks are going to be worked out, and yeah, and I think we're going to learn how to use it to harness the tools better too, and its limitations, and yeah, what is it really good for?
Yeah. And like they've been saying ever since I entered the field of education 25 years ago, it's like you have to embrace uh, the what the future is, right? And they used to say 21st century skills, but and some schools
Uh,
still say those, but right, it could have been something 20-25 years ago, and now this is what it is, right? You really need to stay ahead of the curve as an educator, and that's why I put out content like this, these types of conversations. Well, I think we've had a great talk around, our English language learners and their needs, and also the program and some of the frustrations that we have around students that are still in the program after many years. Out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I think embrace change and be willing to learn, because I like one thing I always tell my students, no matter how smart you are, knowledge is infinite. There's always more to learn and more to explore, and life is more exciting when it's not like, up, I'm done. I've learned it all. It's like we all can keep evolving and we can all keep learning and growing. So whether it's AI or something else, I think just keeping that mindset of we're not done until until we're done, we're not done. So I think embracing change and looking for opportunities to grow and learn. But I think, yeah, just see find one new maybe one new tool that you're like, hey, I wonder what this is, and explore it. And you might say, ew, this isn't for me, but it may open up some doors where you're like, wow, this is really useful. So I think being open minded and just trying to keep a spirit of curiosity, especially if you're in education. I think that being open and being curious is it serves you and it serves everyone else you work with too, by because you're going to be open to learning from them as well.
I think that's really important, right? Explore something, that you think may or may not work for you, but it's always good to try. Well, where can people connect with you and find you online?
The place I'm most active is actually LinkedIn. So if you just look up Sarah Wysocki on LinkedIn, that's where I'm most active. I am on X. It's my handle is at Sarah Wysocki 10. I think I have about a dozen followers on there. So not a huge following. Also, if you Google me, you'll probably come up with the Edutopia website, and I have my articles on there. And yeah, and I think anyone who is interested in writing and being part of this conversation about education, um, yeah, go for it. And if they have any questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Reach out. Yeah, if you can find me, I'm happy to share what I know. And I'm not an expert, but I'm willing to share what I how I've been successful and how I've been able to get published, and just how it's benefited me. And
Yeah, well, I think you've had a lot of great things to share today, and hopefully people reach out if they're interested in learning more. Thank you so much for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast today.
yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your time and yeah, having me on today. So thank you.